Okay, and we are live.
Great. Welcome everybody to the House Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee. We're here on Thursday, February 6th to continue learning about our state's IT systems. So we'll quickly go around the table and introduce ourselves, including our committee assistant. Then we like everybody who's in the room to introduce themselves, let us know who they're here representing, and then we'll turn it over to you and you can identify yourself for the record. So I'm Kathleen James from the Bennington 4 District.
Scott Campbell from St. John Bray, Calgary, Essex.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Dara Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Kleppner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Jack Locker, committee assistant.
Krista Murray, Department of Corrections.
Great.
Haley Summer, also Department of Corrections.
Super.
Oh, Zoe, I'm an intern for Zats in Renfrew.
Great. Thank you so much. And that's a lobbying firm or a?
Yes.
Great.
Consulting firm.
Pardon? Consulting firm. All righty. Thank you so much. To our witness.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Nick Demmel. I'm the Commissioner of Corrections for the state of Vermont. I think this is my first time in this committee ever. So the inaugural event, this is pretty exciting. I want to make the presentation as responsive to your interests, your needs as possible. I'm happy to give just a very brief overview of our infrastructure, talk about maybe a couple of our pain points, but I really, want to know what you want to know and try to get you the information that you need. But I appreciate the invitation to come in and excited to be here.
Great.
So I'll start maybe with just a very high level overview of the system itself. So Vermont has a very complicated and unique correction system. It's called a unified system, meaning we have folks who are charged with a crime but have not gone to trial yet. We have folks who have gone to trial and been convicted, they're sentenced, and everybody in between. And we also run all of our community supervision programs. So that's in Vermont, that's probation, parole, furlough. So if anybody is involved in the justice system and is either in custody or is in community under supervision, the State Department of Corrections supervises them. There's only 5 states that operate that way in the country. They all tend to be small. And the reason, I think, largely is to create an economy of scale. But that makes it for a very complicated system with a lot of different types of folks moving through. And I raised that with you, one, because it's interesting, but I think more importantly, because it makes our data infrastructure very complicated also, which I think we'll talk about a bit today. We have about 1,500 folks incarcerated on a daily basis. That varies, on a daily basis as well, but roughly between 1,400 and 1,500 right now. We have about 4,000 individuals in community supervision under our care in the community. We have about 1,000 staff. We have a $220 million budget, making us one of the largest departments in state government, I think after just maybe AOT and DCF. And almost all of our budget, I think about 2% is not, but almost all is general fund. So tax dollars coming to the Department of Corrections. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, and I promise this will relate to IT because we're going to stay focused on IT today. Of the incarcerated folks, how many are out of state and down at Core Civic or?
Yep, yeah, there's a Core Civic facility. We have about 114, I think. That number does not tend right now, it will not exceed 125. So we tend to keep it under 125. But I think lately we've been running in the mid 110s.
Okay, so when we get around to ITs, I was just wondering how those folks are integrated since they're being held in a completely different system, but on we go.
Yeah, so let's talk about the IT. So our IT infrastructure in the Department of Corrections, I think I will generously describe as antiquated. We rely on, we use ADS, but we rely on a central system we call the offender management system that contains most of our data on all of the folks that we supervise or are in our custody. That's contracted out to a private vendor. We're towards the end of that contract, and it is a laborious process to use and manipulate, as I think Krista can attest to. But does the job, and it's made, I think, a lot of improvements over the years as we get towards the end of the contract. We also keep separate data on other pieces of information, so our education data for the population is separate from that. Our electronic health record system is separate from that, but they can interact to an extent depending on the data set. We largely then rely on the Microsoft suite for our office work. And then aside from that, we have contracts with other private vendors who provide digital services to the incarcerated population. So in Vermont, every incarcerated individual has a tablet that is on a secure, it connects to the internet, but it's a secure network, and they can access limited approved programming on there. So on the tablet, they can communicate with loved ones, send emails and messages. There's education programming on there. There's mental health resources available. There's a library and access to some media that they can purchase, and a few other applications. And so each person has one of those in all 6 of our facilities around the state. That's provided by a private contractor who also does our telecommunication services, so telephone for the incarcerated. And then beyond that, we're installing an education internet system right now that'll expand our ability to provide education services. We keep education technology separate from our tablet system. So folks who are in our educational programming will use separate tablets or laptop devices that are connected to a secure education-only internet infrastructure. Those are kind of the broad strokes of the technology we're using right now. I think there's a lot of appetite in the department to modernize these systems, but also bring in new technology. I'll highlight just a couple of pain points as it relates to the technology. We have a staffing crisis in the Department of Corrections, which I think many probably know about. And one of the major pain points that our staff experience is they have a lot of work to do, and a lot of it is very analog. Either it's in written logbooks or on clipboards, our schedules are written down. And so we're seeking opportunities to introduce technology to help take down some of that workload, and so that we can free up bandwidth with our staff to be able to do the work we really want them focused on. One of the primary reasons we can't do that right now is the lack of a Wi-Fi system for the department to use within our correctional facilities. So the legislature, I think 2 years ago, funded a heat mapping study of the entire system, and mapped out where we would put all of our hotspots, all of our Wi-Fi connection points. Came back, they estimated the cost, and this was done in concert with BGS and with ADS. So it cost us about $3.5 million to install Wi-Fi in our facilities today. And I really can't underscore how much that would open up the possibilities for the Department of Corrections, both for staff, for the department just running the system itself, but also opportunities for the population and some of the vocational training, career technical education programs that we're moving towards in the future. We have sought funding for that from the Community Broadband Board and not had a lot of success. The House Corrections Committee sent a letter urging them to support this effort last year, and that kind of fell on deaf ears. So we continue those efforts today. I'll highlight that the federal money that's coming to the state for broadband expansion specifically calls out correctional facilities and incarcerated individuals as a target recipient group. And so we think that they should be at the top of the list. We should be at the top of the list. But that's an effort that we continue to push for. And I would say as we look at the IT infrastructure writ large, that is the thing we need the most right now.
Yeah. So before we get too far down the road, I have so many questions about everything that you just said. So do you want to keep going and we'll come back?
No, I mean, I've largely told you what we do. I'm sure there's gaps here, but maybe your questions will illuminate some of those and we can dig in.
Okay. My questions fall into the bucket of your IT system that you said is antiquated and needs to be upgraded, and then the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
So do you want to, maybe we could start with the system?
Sure.
Great. So you said it was antiquated. You said it was ending. The contract is ending. So I was curious, how old when is the contract ending? What do you think you'll do when the contract ends? Do you have a sense of how you will replace or upgrade that? How much it might cost? And then also sort of what you use it for, because from conversations with our colleagues on corrections, I'm definitely envisioning something like what we've heard from some other state agencies where, you know, your correctional officers are walking around making notes on paper and as they're making their rounds or whatever, and then having to come back to their desk and enter that into a spreadsheet. So could you
Or it
just give
stays
us
in the
the,
logbook forever and
Yeah,
we
so-
never access the data.
so if you could just give us a
Sure.
much fuller picture of that, and then we can talk about the Wi-Fi, because this is what we're here to learn about.
Yeah.
This is what we're all about.
I'm gonna rely on Krista a little bit for some of these data points. So it is 8 years old?
Yes.
So the system we have now, we're towards the end of the contract. It was implemented about 8 years ago. We have a year left on the contract.
Yes, March of 2026 is when the current contract is up.
That's
We-
interesting, because we're hearing about like 40-year-old systems and stuff. So your IT system is only 8 years?
We are slightly ahead of some other states.
Okay.
And slightly behind the rest of the world. You know, I mean, I think it's a balancing
Yeah.
act, right? And I'm a lifelong government employee, not here in Vermont the whole time, but I can appreciate how difficult it can be to institute some of these systems across a government agency. We likely will seek an extension to the contract to give us a little more runway as we look to the next generation of what that should be. So the system is largely, I'm gonna say it's off the shelf, and that doesn't do it justice, because we've put in a ton of work to kind of molding it to our needs. Particularly the DOC team has done just an amazing amount of work over the last 8 years. But one of the challenges with a correction system is there are a few vendors that sell these offender management systems, and they're kind of out of the box. You get everything in one package. So that's your data storage. It's all of your case management, reporting, kind of all packaged together. Unfortunately, ours doesn't have all of our data. It's got much of the data, but there are these other pockets that I mentioned. And it's very difficult, I think Krista might attest to, it's very difficult to change the system. It takes a lot of work to change reporting structures or change fields on a form. And the end user experience, I think, it's not like using an iPhone. It's like using an older system that's pretty cumbersome, and if you don't type the data in the right way, then you don't get clean data, which creates challenges for us down the road. That's kind of where we're at, and it's come a long way, and there are still improvements that are going to be made before we even end the program. We did put out a request for information last year on OMS systems, and I want to say the lowest quote we got was 41 million.
I don't remember the exact numbers. Our current vendor was, of course, the lowest, but the next one up was 2 to 3 times the cost of our current contract.
The other thing I'll highlight about this is, I mentioned at the beginning that we're a unified system. That means we operate both as a jail and as a prison system. And those are very different populations. And so when we look across the spectrum of available products, usually there are jail products and prison products, and never the two shall meet kind of thing. We had to choose when we were buying this product, which one do we want? The jail population is much more complicated. They're transient, they turn over quickly. You could be with us for 5 minutes, 10 hours, or you could be with us for a year pending trial, depending on what's going on with your particular case. So there's a lot more that goes into that population. So we chose a system that was targeted for jails and manipulated it to include the prison population. I think that was the right choice, but those are difficult choices to make.
Because are there a lot more jail people, or is it just more, you needed a system that would be responsive to this more complex?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. So the jail population makes up about a little less than a third of our population.
Okay.
But if you took the total number of detainees that came through our system in a given year, it would far exceed the number of sentences people
Sure.
have. But there's constant churn. and somebody could come in multiple times, so you could be arrested every month and come through our system, but be released again. And that's where like the clean data is really important, because we want you to show up as the same person each time, and we don't want, oh, different middle initial or different spelling of the last name, or we got the date of birth wrong.
Right.
And so those data cleanliness issues are really important to us. So anyway, so that's kind of how we got to the system we have. We are debating what we should go to next. And I think we're interested in taking a different tack. This is not the kind of data structure that is popular right now amongst other industries. I think of it more as like the old kind of mainframe model where everything like sits in one place, and today that's not really how data is structured in most private industry or other even government agencies. And I think we need smarter case management, we need smarter analytics, better reporting coming out of it. We'd like to see more complex risk assessments that are done within the system. And so as we look to the next version of this, there's a debate, I think, in our minds about what it will look like. And we haven't quite settled on that, but we have some good ideas.
Okay, so you're thinking at this point you might extend your contract, so we're not looking at a tens of millions of dollars budget
Not next year.
request next year. No, I'm really trying to
But
get these things on our radar,
soonish,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so not,
I
probably
also
not,
think our hope is that by changing the model we use, we also could draw down the costs a bit. So that remains to be seen. But
okay, but on the radar.
yeah, I would think the appropriations request for a new system would probably be 2 to 3 years out
Okay,
at this point.
and
Maybe a
is
little
that
more.
something that you can start setting aside? Do you have a little a little piggy bank?
Well, we have put a little money aside to kind of experiment in this space,
Okay.
but not to the tune that we will need.
Okay. I'm asking mostly, I see, sorry. I'm just asking mostly because we're trying as a committee to get a handle on how major IT appropriations come to us and whether the state, and we're gonna be taking testimony on this, is systematically setting aside money in a dedicated tech fund, or whether the legislature is always just gonna have to be reactive.
Yeah.
To $40-50 million requests and try to fit that into our budget
Right.
in any given year.
I think one other, I know the gentleman has a question, I think one other thing I would just put out there for the topic of conversation is our system is our system, and it doesn't play well, and other systems don't play well with it in other sister departments of government.
Right.
And yet the population we're serving tends to be also involved with the DCF system, the DMH system. They may be a Dale client, or they may have Medicaid, they almost all do at some point have Medicaid. So they're touching all these other systems, but we don't have really seamless continuity of case management that moves through the different systems. And part of that is an IT issue, that every department kind of has its own thing and they don't always talk to each other. That also, I think, creates cost inefficiencies. If we had systems that were smooth, had a smoother pipeline between each other, I think, you might be able to avoid some costs, less duplication, less the case file in DOC looks totally different than the case file in DMH, that type of thing.
Brooke Klepper?
What are your IT needs with the 4,000 people under community supervision, and do they interact with your IT systems in any way?
So that same OMS system manages those cases as well. So an individual who comes through our system is released on one of those conditions of release or types of release into the community. They have a file in OMS. Our probation parole officers access our OMS system to do their job. They also tend to, keep local data because it's sometimes easier to use, and hopefully it gets into the bigger system at some point. As far as the need for the folks themselves who are in community, there isn't a lot. Largely and they're citizens out in the community, they just happen to be under supervision. We do use electronic monitoring and other devices like that for some of our population under supervision. That's all provided by the department and maintained by us. And there isn't a high need there. We're in pretty good shape.
Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
how do you track that? Is that on a spreadsheet somewhere, or is that,
The community supervision, the
well,
electronic monitoring.
and for example, what you just said about electronic monitoring, you must keep track of who's got, ankle bracelet on or whatever.
Yeah.
Where they are and what's going on with it, right?
So I think that's included in OMS, right? If somebody is on electronic monitoring.
Yeah, there's a whole
Okay,
there's a-
approval process, you
Yes.
know, to make sure that, you know, where they are, there's
Right.
service and whatnot. But then there's an actual interface with that company where you can go and see, you know, where they're at. So separate system.
Is it included in the overall offender management system, or is it a completely separate system?
So the fact that the person is on electronic monitoring, that approval process goes through the main system. And then if I'm a probation officer and I need to see where you're at, I'm accessing a different system that's provided by the vendor to go see, you know, where's your bracelet? Oh, the bracelet was cut, you get a notification.
And what you said earlier about most of the population also has interactions with other departments in the government, and therefore that their data exists elsewhere. Just seems like an opportunity for some kind of integration. Is that something that you're also looking at for next generation system?
Yeah, so we are but one part of a much bigger enterprise.
Yeah.
But as we look to design our next generation, I think that's top of mind for us. We want a system that can easily integrate with other systems. And I think that there's both the kind of underlying where the data lives issue and the connectivity or pooling data into one place and cleaning it and governing it better. And then there's what does the case management look like, and that kind of sits on top, and how does that connect to other departments?
Yeah.
Both of those issues are important. I think the underlying data issue might be actually easier to solve. The case management one's gonna be a little tougher, but I think having basic, you know, I think of it a little bit like plumbing. It's like you put the pipes there and you lock them up, and then when you're ready to connect something to it, you can just unscrew the cap and now you can connect another pipe to it. And hopefully we can at least get our system set up in a way that it's turnkey, ready to connect when somebody else is able to. And right now that's not how this is.
Also, Kurt, you mentioned that four or five other states have this sort of unified approach with both the prison population and the detained population in the same, and community supervision, all supervised by one department. Are any of them? Have you looked at the software systems that these other states use for managing that? Is there anything we can learn from that?
So I think, as far as I'm aware, most states are still using an OMS system, much like ours. You know, they'll have different flavors, but similar to ours. I think there's discontent in the country on this topic. Just speaking with my counterparts across the country, many of whom I'm very close with, everybody I think is yearning for something better and hasn't quite figured it out yet. But I have, specifically with the other unified systems, I haven't seen a better approach that I'm aware of. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
I guess I'm just wondering, we're gonna wind up having to build something. If there isn't anything on the shelf, we're gonna, or is there an opportunity to collaborate with these other states and try to build something?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I mean, I think that there are pieces that are on the shelf, but we maybe need to arrange it a little differently. I don't mean to be opaque, but I also don't want to get too far forward on my skis. But, you know, I think the basic model that I think we should start driving towards is just a data lake that has all of the data centralized in one place, with permissions set that allows us to securely share information. So either, you know, you could have DCF, DMH, DOC, electronic health records all in one data lake, and then set permissions on who can access it. So only the medical providers can access the health records, only DOC can access the security information, only the mental health providers can access the mental health components, but you have single point of truth, clean data sitting in the lake. It's what you do on top of that that I think gets a lot more complicated. And that's the case management, the analytical layers, the reporting, the risk analysis, the risk assessment tools. I think it's debatable that exists off the shelf, but I'm hopeful.
So maybe collaborating with other states that have a similar problem.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just,
No, I mean.
I don't know anything about this.
No, you're right. And two of the other unified systems are also in New England. So that helps. I mean, and then the others are Hawaii and Alaska, so they're a little further away. But if I need to go to Hawaii to look at their data system and you all want to send me there, I'd be happy to do it.
Somebody's gotta do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tough job.
Yeah, Rep. Morrow?
Curious what the involvement of the Agency of Digital Services has been or is in this whole process.
Yeah, so we have, I forget the formal title, but we have an embedded ADS person in our department, and then we're in the Agency of Human Services, so there's also an embedded ADS person higher up. We have a very good relationship with Secretary and Deputy Secretary over there, and I think they are interested in kind of our vision and understand some of the pain points about having, department-specific systems that are a little clunky. So I think there's a good connection there. I think at times the process can be a bit onerous. But I understand that they're trying to manage a very complex IT enterprise across the state.
Can you say a little more about that? What do you mean by the process? The process of working with them or the process of, I don't know.
The process of moving IT projects through, either the RFP process, the approval process, the integration, the actual launching process. Krista looks like she may want to jump in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think we're likely one of the only departments in the Agency of Human Services that has so many, it's such a big portfolio of different systems that aren't necessarily built and managed by ADS. So I think that, can be challenging as well. We had two people who were with us for, 10 plus years who understood the correction system. So it can be difficult to first understand how corrections works and all the intricacies, and then try to manage, all of the systems that we have. So that I think right now is one of our challenges, because we do have two newer folks. So, getting them up to speed with everything that we're doing on top of, all of these RFPs and systems that we just happen to be at a very interesting point right now where we have, several RFPs going on, several contract renewals, so.
These two new folks are your folks or ADS folks?
They're ADS, so we have an IT director and then underneath an IT manager, and as the commissioner was pointing out, they answer to a deputy director and director that kind of sits over the Agency of Human Services, and each department has any combination of an IT director and manager, and then they report up to that deputy director.
So these folks are responsible for keeping the systems going and looking towards the RFPs for the newer systems and designing, or they're just focused on keeping the wheels on the bus at this point?
Yeah, I think so. My team.
I would clarify what your team does, because I think this is also unique to DOC. Yeah,
so I have a team of 6, and we manage the systems. So like our offender management system has a lot of capabilities for us to do kind of development in. So, we can create forms, we can create reports. And then we have the EHR, which we also have some, capabilities of changing. But the offender management system has just under 20 interfaces, data exchanges with various different agencies, departments. And so we manage the data, so we understand the data. We go in and write the code in SQL to pull the data, out. And we also have a data analysis and research unit who are also, doing analysis of the data as well. So we're unique in that I don't think other departments within AHS have, that capability. And so we're kind of a IT-ish type, unit within the department. And it's because, we have all of these, systems that weren't built, internally within the state.
EHR is electronic health record.
Oh, sorry.
I
Jargon.
And then we also have a data and research team, which is really like our analytical team that we built out because we had so many needs and that just wasn't a service that was provided by the state. So we have two separate in-house units that deal with our data in different ways that I think sets us apart a bit from our colleagues. But we also have, Chris's point, very complicated data and data needs that tend to be, unique to corrections, and so you can't just like grab another system that a different department uses easily.
Okay. Broadband? Wi-Fi?
Oh, yeah, Wi-Fi.
So just curious about that, because we had definitely connected with the folks on the Corrections and Institutions Committee who actually reached out to us and had wanted to make sure that we got you in to learn a little bit about not only your IT system, but about the challenge you're having in getting Wi-Fi in your facilities. So can you just start at the beginning and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we don't have Wi-Fi that is available for the department staff to use. Largely what I think, it'd be difficult to find a place in the modern era that doesn't have Wi-Fi in its office building and its facilities in our case. And that really limits our ability to introduce new technology. So if you're a correctional officer and you show up to work, one of the first things you'll do is go to the main control and get all of your equipment for the day. So that's radio, your OC spray, that type of equipment. Somebody will pull out a logbook and open the logbook and write down, Officer so-and-so got radio number, whatever, checked in, at this time. And then they'll go to the next part. Oh, got keys, and write that down. That's the type of system that's happening in corrections today. Officer will then go to their living unit where they work. And when they do their checks, where they walk around and observe, make sure everybody's healthy, safe, they go back, they write down at this 2100 hours, I walked around the unit at this time, they'll initial it. And that's all paper analog. We're not capturing any of that data. We're not able to verify that it happened at the time they said it did unless we kind of compare that with cameras. And so I think we're so far behind the curve, and at every opportunity where we wanted to introduce new things, like an inventory system where you check out your gear and it's inventoried, or digital logbooks so we can see, like, it's quicker for the officer to like plug it in real quick, but also we can see all that data and we can verify it was entered at 2100 hours. He said he did his tour at 2100 hours. We can't do any of that right now. Where we try to introduce those things, the holdback is always Wi-Fi. And there's a lot of other capabilities that we'd be interested in exploring that we just can't. So one example would be medical alert bracelets. So we have a lot of vulnerable folks who either have illnesses, are unable to move easily, have a history of substance use disorder, and could go into medical distress, have heart disease, could go into medical distress. Right now, our system, an officer walks around and checks on people kind of in prearranged set of times. But if we had a system where those vulnerable folks had an alert bracelet and we can monitor heart rate and see, oh, their heart rate's spiking, maybe they're having an event, maybe they're fighting, or their heart rate is dropping, maybe they're having an event, there's a problem, officer could respond immediately. All of that type of infrastructure, though, requires us to have internet in our units, and we don't have that in the way that we need it right now.
Why not?
Good question.
I mean, is it just a fiscal, I know you're gonna
It-
talk about the money, is it just because you don't have the money, or
It
are the
is,
buildings so
well,
thick?
they
that
are
it-
complicated, so it's
Okay.
complicated to roll out a Wi-Fi system in the types of facilities that we run, because they are largely steel and concrete. But we have done all the work, and the legislature, to its credit, funded that work and was very supportive of us doing that work in order to enable us then to install the system. So we mapped out the whole system. We know where all of the wireless access points would go. We know what type of equipment we would need. We know the cost. And now we're kind of at the finish line, and we have been encouraged repeatedly to go get the available funding that's already been sent to the state, vice going to the general fund to ask for this type of money. And that's where we just kind of run into roadblocks.
What kind of road, so you've come with budget requests
Well,
a couple of years?
gone to the Community Broadband Board, which both the federal delegation and this legislature sent us to, saying, they have federal funding available that names your population as a priority group. That would be the place to go to get, this type of expansion money. And that we just have not gotten any traction there. And I can't actually tell you why, I don't know. But we've tried repeatedly.
Okay, so when you don't get when a grant application is not successful, and I know that this is often hard to get, I've done a lot of grant writing myself.
Sure.
It's often hard to get feedback about, hey, why didn't we get that money?
Mhm.
Okay, so you're not clear why, it just hasn't, your grants.
Well,
haven't
and
been successful.
we have folks on our team that routinely go to the broadband board meetings to advocate for this, and we just are not getting resonance on this topic. And yet it's, critical state infrastructure, it's a public safety issue, and it's a group that's named as being particularly in need of these services, and we're just not getting traction.
Okay, so requests, I see you. So requests of the legislature for general fund money have resulted in, you should really apply to the broadband board, and that's where you're stuck.
So I forget if it was general fund or capital bill, but the heat mapping study was appropriated by the legislature. And then we haven't gotten further than that point.
Okay,
Yeah, so I guess I'm just wondering whether you personally have reached out to the this director of the broadband board to ask, so what's the
We have, and unfortunately, we're not getting a response. And like I mentioned earlier, the legislature sent a letter last year, and that also did not get a response.
okay.
So it's just a peculiar, I'm not sure what's happening, why there's a breakdown. And we'll continue to advocate, but we're kind of at a crossroads, I think.
Okay, thanks.
We're compiling a list of projects, a little to-do list for us, so maybe we can look into this a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, if DOC could get a spot on the list, I would say Wi-Fi is the biggest need right now that I think would majorly impact our availability of services and staff.
That's kind of a question.
Yeah, I had one too, you go first.
Well, just about, how ready are you to roll it out? If they were to check for $3.5 million tomorrow, how long would it take to get?
Yeah, I mean, we would have to work probably with our BGS counterparts, maybe ADS also, but I think from the department standpoint, we're ready to go. We would move heaven and earth to get this to happen because it's that important.
Do you have an RFP or a bid even in hand that you could execute?
That part I don't remember.
No, but I'm sure based off of the heat mapping, we could come up with one.
Yeah.
And we would potentially could use a vendor the state already has under contract, providing similar services.
Okay, so and avoid having to go out to bid.
Yeah, potentially.
So a Wi-Fi provider, you would be okay if, I know your facilities are in different parts of the state. It wouldn't matter which, like in Windsor, whoever's providing broadband down there to get, you could use different vendors if you needed to.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so we stood up a network for the education piece of things. Did that separately because that's using education funds because we have the Community High School of Vermont that's an accredited high school. So we went through one vendor for internet at each of the facilities it's called First Light. And so we could theoretically go off of the same,
They're an ISP, aren't they?
yeah, so we would get the internet from them. We
Yeah.
had a different vendor come in, run all of the cabling and put up the access points. But going, forward, what people typically do now is they contract out the equipment because the equipment turns over, it becomes obsolete so quickly. So you contract out the equipment, and then of course and then you don't have to have that large number, that you have to pay right up front. You can stretch it out over time. So have the vendor come in, run the access points, all the wires, and then you would pay for that, and then continually for the rental of the equipment, and then pay for the internet.
All the facilities have internet, of course. So it's just a matter of running the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, running the Wi-Fi,
throughout the facilities.
into the units, because where the programming happens, there's Wi-Fi there that my team is managing the firewall, all of the traffic in and out to lock it down to ensure that it's only for the services and websites and stuff that they need.
Right. Thanks.
I wanted to learn a little bit more. You'd mentioned earlier educational opportunities for the folks in the correctional facilities, and I had run into, just coincidentally, the president of CCD out in the card room, and we were talking about the fact that I believe, and I may be remembering incorrectly, but that your residents are eligible to take classes from CCD, but they would need that's not currently happening because they would need Wi-Fi for that. Or can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Vermont is one of the only states in the country that has a system like this. We were able to secure with CCD a federal earmark, congressionally directed spending appropriation, I think 3 or so years ago, something like that, to provide free community college education to the incarcerated population in Vermont and our staff, anybody in the Department of Corrections. Kind of a watershed program. So they're able to provide classes in person, which they do, CCD does in our correctional facilities, and then our staff obviously access it through the community network of CCD. But there are many opportunities that we are all striving to achieve, like virtual learning, having virtual classrooms, even doing asynchronous learning where somebody could have an education tablet in their cell and they could be taking courses at night through CCD, but those are all limited by the lack of Wi-Fi in our units. That is, I can't say enough about how impressive that program is and just the promise that it presents. I mean, I think there's a lot of room to grow that project, but you're right, CCV highlighted to us that the only way we can continue to expand that opportunity is by having Wi-Fi.
So federal funding available, and
the program, the CCD partnership is funded by a federal earmark, not for Wi-Fi, but it funds the coursework and funds all the vouchers for staff. The incarcerated folks can become eligible for federal education funding then to continue to afford tuition.
like Pell?
Yeah, second chance Pell.
Yep, Title IV PEP funding.
Yeah.
Okay, so the lack of Wi-Fi in facilities is currently the barrier between, our folks are not able to take advantage of this right now at all.
Well, they're able to take advantage of the in-person courses, but
Okay.
they're obviously limited. You only have so many instructors, you can only schedule so many classes. But
Gotcha.
if you had the opportunity to do it virtually, electronically, the course catalog kind of opens up. Somebody could be sitting in the Springfield Correctional Facility taking classes at CCB Williston, no problem.
Okay.
And be taking classes with students out in the community. You just would be happy to do it on their tablet.
Several different Wi-Fi systems, or they're all integrated? the broadband is outside these facilities presently, and they're just not the rebroadcasting within the facility?
That's right. Yeah, so internet runs the building, but does not, right now, cannot get it to kind of spread within the building.
But the education facilities, I think of it as bandwidth, that you only have a couple of channels of
It's really,
education. and-
it's location. So the education services are provided in a classroom. So there's Wi-Fi run to that classroom, but it's specifically Wi-Fi that was funded by the education fund for that purpose, just for that location.
So that goes to a room in the facility or a wing or a corridor.
Right.
The temporary housing, the awaiting trial housing, they're like Rutland, Marble Valley. Does that house both just short-term prisoners awaiting judicial matters? And if he gets convicted, he goes to a Springfield or a St. Albans or St. Johnsbury, or is that?
The general answer to that is no, the populations are mixed. Marble Valley tends to be highly detainee focused because of the nature of the facility. But at Springfield, for example, they would have a good mix of both.
Temporary,
Yeah.
we call it temporaries and
Detainees are the
long-term.
folks who are before sentence, before they've gone to trial. So detainees and sentenced, and they are mixed together.
I'm back on the education topic. Now I'm gonna get way down into the weeds, but I see we have a few minutes. Sorry about the chopstick. There we go.
I thought that was a pencil.
No, it's a chopstick.
Wow.
So are you required by either state or federal law to provide education to detainees who are under the age of 18 or 21?
I think it's 25.
25.
23. It's higher than 21, but yes, under Vermont law, we're required.
Under Vermont law. Are you able to successfully do that, or are there IT barriers getting in the way of that?
Well, so those courses are largely provided in person.
Okay,
And we have our own cadre of educators under the community high school.
okay, yeah,
So what level of education are you required to by state law?
Up to the high school level. And Vermont, as somebody mentioned, we have an accredited high school, so it's not a GED, you get a full diploma. But we provide education services that span from, remedial literacy all the way through college education.
right,
We're just not required to provide all of that. And it's only required for folks under a certain age. That doesn't mean people can't access it if they need that, but the requirement is on us for a certain population.
okay. So, but that's a physical classroom, that's not
It is.
getting into your IT.
You can see how technology can enhance that, and we do have education technology, and we're expanding that right now. But that would be captured under that education network, which is separate from the need that we're talking about.
Okay. Additional questions, comments, anything that we?
Have you looked at, you talked about the smaller states, the Alaskas and you said toured New England, so I'm assuming New Hampshire.
Connecticut and Rhode Island are the two.
Really, and they don't have significantly larger populations, is there?
Connecticut does. Rhode Island, I think, is fairly similar, maybe a touch larger.
So I guess with what is the participation of the inmates above that age 23 in voluntary? These states that can provide this have the facility to provide that. Do you have any measurement of the amount of detainees that take advantage of educational?
Yeah, I don't have that data with me today, but we do track that data. What I'll say is we've noticed over time a changing trend. 10, 15, 20 years ago, many folks came in without a high school level education. Today, most folks come in with a high school level education, but don't have higher education above that. And so we're adding new services to meet the needs of the population we're serving today.
I'd be a little bit more concerned about the degradation of somebody who's incarcerated for a period of time, significant period of time. I'm not talking 4 or 6 months, but years, that you don't use it, you lose it. And so the ability to maintain that simple addition or division, multiplication,
Yeah.
more complicated.
Well, I don't think I could do that right now. I haven't used it in a while.
Well, we'll speak to the governor.
He didn't hire me to be his tax commissioner.
Sorry.
Quick question on technical education
Mhm.
for the trades.
Yeah.
We have that Spear Workforce Program.
Yes.
What does that look like?
Yeah, so this is a great area where we're building out those programs right now. Historically, Vermont had what we call the industries program. So there were a couple of industries, furniture manufacturing, that type of thing. Those programs taught very specific, not high demand skills. And the way it was structured, it was creating huge budget deficits. And so we ended those programs a few years ago with the goal to move towards a vocational training and career technical education model. We're actually exploring further partnership with CCV to help us do a lot of that work, with the goal of specifically targeting skills that people want and also are in high demand in the community, so we can help fill some of those labor gaps, and folks can get new skills. We know, the data is very clear. There are a couple of predicates to success when people leave a correctional facility, and one of them is income. If you don't have income coming in, it's very difficult to sustain yourself. The other's housing, substance use treatment. And so that's one area we think we can majorly impact in helping folks get skills that connect to high paying jobs in the community. And Vermont is a great, I think, very open to hiring formerly incarcerated folks. That's not true everywhere, but up in New England more broadly, but Vermont specifically, I think we can have a lot of impact. So we're working to go that model. Those systems, though, will need Wi-Fi also, and particularly when we look at certain types of technical skills that we want to train folks on, like HVAC technicians, or we were just being shown some machinery that they want to bring in where folks can learn specific skills that connect to the trades out in the community. Nowadays everything connects to the internet, right? And so that's another kind of gap that we've got at the moment.
Yeah.
I just want to put, and it's going backwards to systems, but I kind of wanted to put a plug in this piece, and that is court data is another significant piece of our infrastructure, or of our system in general, because charges drive our legal statuses, our detainees and whatnot, and our assessments. And so we currently don't have that data exchange with the court system, so that becomes a challenge. So in looking at a data lake, that would be one of our, top priorities in getting data from the courts, because we use it to computate their sentencing and where they're going to be housed, things like that. And so that can be a real barrier for us as well. And it's very staff intensive to have to enter all of that information into the system.
What agency or how do we learn about who holds the data for the court system? Is that centralized under?
Judiciary.
Yeah, I think they've separated from ADS. I think they do their own.
Yeah.
NDS, please.
ADS.
ADS, I heard that, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so judiciary. All right, Jack, can you just put a little pin in? We need to hear from judiciary about their data system.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just wanted to get back to the Wi-Fi thing. You said you had your buildings all mapped out.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking for your broadband provider to do all that, or can that be subcontracted out to somebody else, the broadband, or however you get your signal, just make the connection?
Yeah, I think we're agnostic to who does the work. We would put it out through the normal bidding process or ride on another state contract.
Okay, and do you have any of that money to do that now?
No.
Oh, you don't have?
We have the map, we can tell you exactly where to put it, we just don't have the money to buy it and put it there.
All right.
Three
I guess that was.
$3.5
$3 million.
million, yeah.
And that's with buying the actual equipment.
Yeah, so there's opportunities to maybe be a little cheaper than that.
So would there be a cost difference if you focused on your facilities only and not the educational piece for college, because you're not state law mandated for college.
The education piece is funded separately. And so what we're asking for is funding for a DOC specific Wi-Fi system that we can use for whatever we wanted it to, but it would be kind of ubiquitously available to the system.
Our,
Staff and
Yeah, we could,
residents.
yeah, depending on what type of technology we wanted to make available, but yes, it could be available to residents.
yeah, so to your point earlier, where you're talking about they were, doing things, coming back, entering things into a spreadsheet, with having that Wi-Fi throughout the facility, they could have a tablet, they could be entering in the information as they're going through, doing cell checks, things like that. That's where the Wi-Fi, would come in, one of the areas where the Wi-Fi would come into play. For
Great.
staff.
Okay. I think